In a small town in Oregon, where rows of maple trees turned crimson every autumn, there stood an old wooden house on the edge of the forest. That house had once been filled with the laughter of a family of three: David Miller, his wife Grace, and their little son Liam. But all of that became nothing more than memory when a cruel illness concert took Grace's life. Just as Liam had turned 2, on the day Grace passed away. The sky turned gray and the rain fell steadily all afternoon. David held his small son in his arms, feeling as if the entire world had collapsed. Liam was far too young to understand what loss meant. He only babbled "mommy" unconsciously, each sound slicing David's heart. From that moment on, he knew he was no longer just a father, he would have to take on the role of a mother as well. For 8 years, David chose to remain alone. He never once thought of remarrying, despite the advice of many. He feared that any other woman stepping into their lives might unintentionally take Grace's place in Liam's heart. So he poured all his love, all his time, all his strength into raising his son. Though the two of them lived without a mother's presence, our days were simple and warm. In the mornings, David packed a small lunchbox for Liam to take to school. Usually a peanut butter and strawberry jam sandwich, Grace's old recipe. In the afternoons, when the school bell rang, David would already be waiting by the gate, wearing his worn-out knit jacket and gentle smile. Liam, thin but bright-eyed, would always dash into his father's arms. Neighbors often pitied the widowed father raising a child scene. More than once, old Mrs. Wilson from next door brought over freshly baked goods, shaking her head as she set them on the table. "David, you can't stay like this forever. Liam needs a woman's care." David would only give a faint smile, brushing his son's hair as he replied, "He already has me. That's enough." In his heart, it wasn't just a reassurance, it was a vow. He knew the responsibility was heavy, but it was the only thing that kept him moving after the loss. Time passed. Liam grew from a babbling toddler into a 4th grader, then a 5th grader. He was a quiet boy, preferring books and drawing to sports like other children. To his classmates, he seemed different, sometimes mocked, but he never told his father. David only noticed through the fleeting sadness in Liam's eyes when he sat silently in a corner, filling page after page with gray sketches. Many nights, after long hours fixing cars at the garage, David would step quietly into his son's room. He would watch Liam sleeping soundly, brown hair spilling across the pillow, arms wrapped tightly around the old teddy bear Grace had left behind. David's heart tightened and softened all at once. He would whisper to himself, "I must stay strong for him. I can't fall apart," and so life drifted quietly, day after day. But when Liam turned 10, for the first time David felt a void he could not fill, the absence of a woman's touch in their home. Clothes went unmended, meals remained simple and repetitive. And when Liam asked about his mother in the evenings, David stumbled over his answers. He would never forget one rainy day when Liam sat by the window and asked softly, "Dad, do I have a mom like the other kids?" David's throat tightened. All he could do was pull his son into his arms and whisper, "Your mom is always here, in both our hearts." But that night he lay awake for hours, wondering if it was time to open his heart againeth. Perhaps Liam deserved a fuller home. What he did not know was that this choice would one day drag both father and son into a storm. At 40, David still carried a calm air, his body strong from years of labor, his sun-browned face etched with quiet thought. To him, Liam was everything. He believed that as long as the love between father and son remained, they could endure any hardship. But life is rarely what we plan. When David finally considered opening his heart, he could not have imagined that this choice meant to bring peace would instead plunge Liam into the darkest days of his childhood. And from this point, the story of the hidden cameras began to unfold. One Sunday morning in early spring, when the cherry blossoms in town had just begun to bloom. David took Liam to church, as he always did. It was a routine he had kept for years, not only to find peace for himself, but also to give Liam a sense of spiritual grounding. That day, in the community room behind the church, David happened to meet Melissa Carter. She was a woman nearing 40, slender, with soft blonde hair that fell in light waves. Melissa was accompanied by her daughter Chloe, a lively 12-year-old girl with bright blue eyes and a radiant smile. They had just moved from another state after Melissa's husband had died in a car accident. From the very first meeting, David felt a quiet bond. They both knew the weight of losing a spouse and raising a child alone. In conversation, Melissa was gentle, warm-voiced, carrying with her an air of shared understanding. "I heard you've stayed single for 8 years." Melissa asked as they stood together on the church porch. "Yes," David answered with a faint smile, glancing at his son, who sat in the corner reading a comic book. "I thought Liam needed stability." "I understand. Chloe has only me as well. I believe children can find it easy to connect. We give them the chance." That one sentence stayed in David's mind all night, for the first time in years. He wondered if perhaps he should open his heart, again, not only for himself, but for Liam, who had grown up with such an aching absence of a mother's love in the weeks that followed. David and Melissa saw more of each other. They took their children to the park, attended the spring fair, and shared quiet dinners around a small table. Chloe was lively and outgoing, while Liam remained quiet and reserved. But sometimes, David caught his son's cautious eyes on Melissa, hesitant, searching, as if trying to decide whether this woman would truly bring good into his life. Then summer came, with sunlight pouring over the wheat fields, and David decided to propose to Melissa. The wedding was simple, held in a friend's backyard. Just a few dozen guests, some quickly arranged bouquets, and a small table of food. But David believed it was the start of something new for them all. On the wedding day, Liam wore a white shirt and a slightly crooked tie. The 10-year-old boy stood close behind his father, watching his new stepmother with a gaze that mixed curiosity and unease. Melissa bent down, smiling, and reached her hand toward him. "You can call me Mom if you'd like." David rested a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder, giving him a small nod. After a few seconds of hesitation, Liam whispered, "Mom." Melissa's smile brightened, convincing everyone around them that this new family would be full of love. But deep inside, David sensed the stiffness in his son's voices, though he were only trying to please his father. After the wedding, Melissa and Chloe moved into David's wooden house. For the first time in 8 years, the kitchen came alive again with a woman's presence. Melissa cooked elaborate meals, kept the house tidy and organized. Neighbors who stopped by praised David warmly. "David, you're so lucky. At last you have someone to take care of you and Liam." David smiled, feeling relieved. He thought, perhaps life had finally decided to ease its trials. At first, Melissa was gentle with Liam. She asked about his schoolwork, bought him new clothes, and even advised David, "He needs more discipline, David. Boys his age should be taught with firmness." David saw nothing wrong in that. He thought Melissa was simply caring for Liam in her way. Meanwhile, Chloe, with her cheerful energy, easily won affection. She often pulled Liam along to play ball or watch movies, though he kept his quiet distance. Not long after, Melissa gave birth to a baby boy, Don. The small house grew louder, fuller. David was overwhelmed with joy, convinced he finally had a complete family, 3 children, a new wife, and a hopeful future. But beneath Melissa's soft exterior, changes began to appear. Sweet words gave way to cold glances when David wasn't around. Small things: a dish left unwashed, unfinished homework. Even a sight could trigger her sharp, scolding tone. Liam felt the difference clearly. To Chloe and baby Aiden, Melissa was tender and doting. But toward him, she was stern, distant, unyielding. Each day, the gap widened in his young heart, unease creeping in like a shadow. And so, the darker days began. In the first weeks after the wedding, everything seemed peaceful. David breathed a sigh of relief, convinced that at last the little house on the edge of the Oregon town had regained the laughter and warmth it had lost for 8 long years. Liam, though cautious, tried to adapt to Melissa's presence. Whenever his father looked, he forced a small smile, as if to reassure him that everything was fine. But when the cherry blossoms fell and the branches stood bare, the warmth began to fade as well. Melissa started to change. In front of David, she remained the gentle wife, the perfect mother. She cradled baby Aiden lovingly, praised Chloe for her good grades, and kept a soft voice in the evenings. Yet when David was away at the garage, the house became a very different place. Liam turned into the thorn in his stepmother's eye. He was assigned more chores than Chloe: washing dishes, scrubbing floors, even cleaning the dog's pen out back. When Chloe tried to help, Melissa stopped her firmly. "You don't need to do anything. Liam must learn to work." At night, while the children studied, Melissa would often pause behind Liam, her voice cold. "You're writing too slowly. Chloe's already finished. Why are you always worse than her?" Each word cut like a small blade into the boy's 10-year-old heart. Liam never dared answer, only lowered his head, trembling as he held his pen. Chloe saw it, wanting to defend him, but she too feared her mother's stern gaze. Once, Liam dropped a cup of milk on the floor. Melissa's anger flared. She forced him to kneel in the corner of the living room for an hour, forbidden to move. She switched off the lights, leaving only a dim lamp casting his small, lonely shadow on the wall. The boy trembled in shame, while from the other room came the sound of Chloe and Aiden's laughter. From these small punishments, Melissa grew harsher. One day, because Liam forgot to take out the trash, she hurled a rag into his face and yanked him outside by the arm. The red marks lingered on his fragile skin. The pain of the body was nothing compared to the erosion of spirit. Melissa knew how to plant fear with words. She would lean close to his ear and whisper, "You don't need your father, do you? He only loves Aiden now. One day, he'll leave you behind." She then forced him to write letters. The words said, "I don't want to live with Dad. I hate my grandparents. I only want to be with Mom." Each time, Melissa folded the letter neatly, slid it into an envelope, and sneered, "If you don't obey, I'll show these to your father. He'll believe you really hate him. And then you'll have no one left on your side." Liam knew it was a lie, but the fear of being misunderstood by his father silenced him. He obeyed, tears blurring his vision every time he wrote the words "Hate Dad," words that stabbed his heart day by day. Liam withered. From a quiet boy with some light in his eyes, he became hollow and distant. At school, he could no longer focus. His grades slipped. Teachers called home, and Melissa replied, "He's just lazy. Don't worry. I'll handle it." When David returned from long days at the garage, all he saw was his sweet wife and his silent son. He thought Liam's silence was simply early adolescence, the awkwardness of a growing boy. Sometimes, David noticed faint bruises on his son's arms or knees. He asked, and Liam gave a strained smile. "I just fell at school, Dad." David believed him more, perhaps forced himself to believe, for the sake of peace. Yet at night, when he entered Liam's room and saw the boy clutching the old teddy bear, eyes wide open in the dark, his heart twisted. He didn't understand why Liam's gaze seemed so far away, as if wanting to speak, but lacking the courage. Neighbors made remarks from time to time. "Liam looks thinner these days. David, he doesn't smile much anymore." David forced a smile, explaining his son was busy with schoolwork. But deep inside, a quiet unease began to grow. Something nameless but heavy. Meanwhile, Liam's only wish during those sleepless nights was simple: to be seen by his father, to be believed, to be held like before. But he didn't know that this silent suffering was only the beginning of a much darker road. And then came the day David saw the undeniable bruise on his son's arm, the day his vague suspicions would finally turn into action. One autumn afternoon, as pale golden sunlight stretched across maple-lined streets, David waited for Liam outside the school gates. He noticed his son walked out more slowly than usual. The boy didn't run into his arms the way he once had. His head was bowed, shoulders slightly hunched. When David approached, Liam winced as though hiding a pain. On the way home, David tried to make conversation. "How was school today, son?" "It was fine, Dad." Liam's voice was small, his eyes fixed on the window. The short, flat answer mirrored the shadow of silence that had hung over him for months. David kept quiet, but unease stirred in his chest. Later, as Liam changed clothes before dinner, David caught sight of a bruise stretching along his son's arm near the elbow. "Liam, what happened here?" David asked, alarmed. The boy flinched, tugged down his sleeve, and forced a smile. "I just fell on the playground, Dad." It was the same old answer. But this time, David couldn't believe it so easily. He gently took his son's arm, feeling the trembling of the small body. The bruise wasn't like a fall, was too even, too sharp, as if someone's grip had left its mark. David looked directly into his son's eyes, voice thick. "Liam, is something happening at home? Who did this to you?" For a moment, Liam's eyes welled with tears, but he shook his head furiously, then darted into his room and slammed the door. David stood frozen outside, his heart pierced with 1,000 needles. That night at dinner, David watched more closely. Melissa sat beside him, sweetly praising Chloe for her top score on a math test. Chloe smiled proudly, while Liam kept his head down, lifting each spoonful carefully, as though afraid of making a sound. David caught a fleeting moment when Melissa glanced at Liam, a brief but icy look that made the boy shrink into himself. David's heartbeat quickened. For the first time, he realized that the happy family portrait he had believed in might only be a cleverly painted mask. In the days that followed, David paid closer attention. He noticed Liam often had new bruises on his arms, his legs. One morning, the boy limped, claiming he had slipped at school. But what David saw in his eyes was not panic, was fear. Liam no longer read or sketched the way he used to. Instead, he curled up silently in the corner of his room, clinging to the old teddy bear. Whenever David knocked on the door, Liam forced a smile and said, "I'm fine, Dad." But his sad eyes betrayed him. David began losing sleep. He lay awake for hours, haunted by bruises, evasive answers, and Melissa's cold glances. Some nights he slipped into Liam's room and saw his son restless in sleep. Body curled tight as though fending off something unseen. He wanted to wake him, to hold him close, but he feared startling him. So he just stood there, silently asking himself, "Have I made a mistake bringing this woman into our lives?" Another morning, as he dropped Liam at school, the homeroom teacher pulled him aside. "Liam has been distracted lately. He rarely joins activities, often sits alone. I've noticed some injuries too, but when asked, he says he fell. You might want to keep a closer eye on him." Her words sliced into David like a knife. He nodded, thanked her, but inside, a fierce determination rose. He had to uncover the truth. That evening, while Melissa was busy soothing baby Aiden, David quietly opened Liam's desk drawer. He hadn't meant to invade his son's privacy, but worry consumed him. Inside, he found crumpled papers, the handwriting shaky. "I don't want to live with Dad anymore. I hate my grandparents. I only want to be with Mom." David's world stopped. He knew these weren't his son's true feelings. Liam loved him, loved his grandparents. He had seen it in every hug, every glance. These words were a blade driven into his chest, and he realized Liam must have been forced to write them. Late that night, David sat alone in the living room, hands clenched tight. The battle between suspicion and fear reached its peak. If his doubts were true, then he had unknowingly delivered his son into harm inside the very home he thought was safe. When Liam came out for a glass of water, David pulled him close, his hand trembling on the boy's shoulder. "Liam, if something is hurting you, you can tell me. I will believe you." The boy froze, lips parting as if to speak. But then his eyes caught Melissa's shadow in the hallway. At once, Liam shook his head, slipped free of his father's hand, and hurried back to his room. David watched him go, helplessness crashing over him. He knew his son was living in a fear he could not yet reach, and he knew it was time to act, not merely to doubt. Deep inside, David began to form a plan to place small, hidden cameras throughout his own home. For an entire week, David lived in restless unease, as though a heavy stone pressed down on his chest. The image of bruises on his son's arm, the shaky letters filled with strange words, they haunted him. Every time he saw Liam quietly bent over his homework, or flinching when Melissa passed by, David felt like he was suffocating. He no longer wanted to rely on Liam's silence or on vague explanations. He needed the truth. He needed proof. He needed to know what was happening inside the very house that should have been the safest place for his son. One evening, after Melissa had put Aiden to bed, David sat at his computer, searching for small hidden cameras. He chose ones that were discreet, disguised as chargers, with memory cards and even phone connectivity for remote viewing. A pang of guilt struck him. It felt like betraying his own family. But then he told himself, if my son is suffering, I cannot sit still. These cameras aren't to spy there to protect Liam. The next morning, pretending to leave early for work, he stopped by an electronics store in town. He bought several cameras, hid them in his toolbox, and brought them home without a word. That evening, while Melissa was busy playing with Aiden, David quietly installed them. One in the living room outlet, one tucked in a kitchen plant, one in the upstairs hallway where Liam was often made to kneel. When he was done, he sat at his desk, heart pounding. For the first time, his home had become a place of surveillance. But his growing unease left him no other choice. On the first day, David could hardly look away from his phone whenever he had a free moment. Yet everything seemed ordinary. Melissa cooked, Chloe did homework, Liam sat at the table. Nothing unusual. David began to wonder if he was paranoid. But on the third day, the harsh truth revealed itself. That afternoon, while David was still at the garage, he opened the app on his phone. The live feed from the living room showed Liam washing dishes. Melissa stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes cold. When the boy's trembling hands dropped a spoon with a faint clatter, Melissa exploded. "You clumsy brat. How many times have I told you? You never listen." She snatched a dishcloth from the counter and whipped it across Liam's shoulder. The boy flinched, bent down to pick up the spoon, but Melissa barked again, ordering him to kneel against the wall. His small shoulders curled in fear. David froze, his wrench slipping from his hand. He could not believe what he was seeing. The woman he had married, the woman he thought would bring motherly love, was turning his child into a victim. That night, he replayed the footage at least 10 times. Each time, his chest tightened. What crushed him most was Liam's eyes as he knelt in the corner, silent, desperate, accustomed to suffering. In the days that followed, the cameras captured more cruelty. One evening, Liam sat at the dining table doing homework. Melissa walked by, glanced at him, and snapped, "Hurry up. Do you think I have all day to wait on you?" When Liam faltered, she slammed the table, ripped the page from his notebook, and forced him to write again, this time the words she dictated. "I hate Dad. I don't need my grandparents." Tears blurred the boy's vision as he wrote each word. Another time. In the kitchen, when Liam washed dishes too slowly, Melissa struck his arm with the broom handle. It wasn't enough to break bone, but the bruise would last. Her eyes burned into him as she hissed, "If you dare tell your father, I'll give him every one of these letters. He'll hate you forever." David sat helpless before the screen, his fists clenched, sweat pouring down his back. He wanted to storm home that instant, tear the door open, and hold his son. But he knew if he moved too soon, Melissa would deny everything. The evidence could be destroyed. Silence would return. He had to endure. He had to gather enough proof so that when the truth came out, no one could deny it. Each night, standing outside Liam's door, David almost went in. Almost confessed, "I know, son. You don't have to suffer anymore." But he stopped himself, afraid Melissa would sense their bond and tighten her grip. David now lived two lives. By day, he was still the steady mechanic, the calm husband at the dinner table. By night, he became a silent witness watching every moment unfold in his own home. Tortured by what he saw, yet forced to wait, every new recording cut deeper into his heart. Every bowed head of his son became fuel for his resolve. One day, he would drag the truth into the light. And Liam would never again have to live in the shadows. After the first recordings, David no longer doubted himself. The truth was undeniable. Melissa was not simply strict. She was deliberately tormenting Liam. But what he hadn't expected was that the mental abuse would prove far more devastating than the bruises on his son's body. One afternoon, on the screen of his phone, David saw Liam seated at the dining table, carefully copying homework. Melissa approached and placed a stack of blank papers in front of him. Her voice was steady, yet cutting. "Put that notebook down. Now write for me." Liam's lips trembled. "Write what?" "Write that you hate your father. Write that you hate your grandparents. Write that you want to leave here and never see them again." The boy froze, the pen quivering in his hand. Melissa leaned in, her face inches from his, whispering with icy threat, "If you don't write, you won't get dinner. And remember, if you resist, I'll tell your father it was you who wanted this. He'll believe me, not you." From the garage, David's vision blurred as he watched his son bite his lip, forcing out shaky words. "I hate Dad. I hate Grandma and Grandpa." Tears splashed onto the page, smearing the lines. Liam quickly wiped them away, writing on, as if stopping for even a second would bring everything crashing down. David gripped the steering wheel of the car he was repairing until his knuckles turned white. His heart felt crushed into dust. He wanted to run home, snatch the paper from his son's hand, and shout, "You don't have to write this. I will never believe you hate me." But he forced himself to stay put. He needed evidence. Those letters soon became Melissa's weapon of control. Every few days, she made Liam write another one. Sometimes the demands grew crueler. "Write that you don't want to live with your father because he doesn't care about you. Write that you want your mother to raise you instead." Each sentence Liam scrawled was another slash across his young heart. Each page left him more hollow, his eyes more vacant. Melissa went further, planting fear with threats. When David was away, she dragged Liam into the dim hallway, pointing her finger at him. "If you dare tell your father, I'll show him these letters. He'll believe you meant every word. He'll see you as a traitor. And trust my heel, choose Aiden over you." The words cut like knives into the 10-year-old soul. Liam began to believe he could lose his father at any moment. He loved his dad fiercely, yet lived in constant fear of abandonment. At night, he clutched his ragged teddy bear, tears soaking his pillow, but never dared confess. David witnessed it all through the camera feed. More than once, rage made him rise to his feet, ready to storm home. But reason dragged him back. Not yet. "If I move too soon, she'll deny it. The evidence will vanish. and Liam will be trapped in silence. That helplessness tormented him every night. He would come home, see his son quiet at the dinner table, see Melissa laughing sweetly with Aiden, and it felt like watching two parallel worlds, one a facade of family happiness, the other a dark prison only he and Liam knew existed. One evening, the cameras captured Melissa bringing Liam into the living room. On the table lay a stack of white envelopes. She opened them, spreading old letters across the table. Her voice was low, but as sharp as steel. "Everything you've written, I'll keep. One day I'll give them all to your father. Then he'll see you as a traitor. And believe me, he'll choose Aiden, not you." Liam sat frozen, eyes wide with terror. He nodded, trembling, like a small bird trapped in a cage with no escape. Tears streamed down David's face as he watched. How long had his son been enduring this alone? How long had he lived in fear without protection? David felt like a failure as a father, as the shield he was supposed to be. Liam was changing. The once quiet but gentle boy was now darkened, wary. Sometimes he even recoiled when David's hand rested on his shoulder. David knew it wasn't rejection, it was the aftermath of being terrorized to the point that no one felt safe anymore. At night, David replayed the recordings, listening to every scream, every threat. Each sound hammered his chest. He knew that if this continued, Liam would not only lose his childhood, but also his faith and love. In family, a new resolve began to burn within him. He had to end this. Not only to save Liam, but to bring the truth into the light. One late winter evening, the wind howled through the cracks of the door as David sat motionless at his desk in the garage. On his phone, the now familiar videos played again. Liam forced to kneel in a dark corner. Melissa standing over him with folded arms, scolding harshly. While Chloe and Aiden sat warmly on the sofa, he switched off the screen and buried his face in his hands. Helplessness rose in him like a chokehold. My son is living in hell inside our own home, and I haven't been able to save him. That night, when he entered Liam's room to say goodnight, David noticed the desk drawer slightly ajar. In the glow of the yellow lamp, he found a small blue notebook with worn edges. Hesitant, he picked it up and opened it. Inside were Liam's clumsy, uneven lines, the diary his son had been writing in secret for months. The first page struck him like a knife. "I miss Mom. I miss when she held me to sleep. If she were still here, maybe I wouldn't be scolded every day." David's hands trembled as he turned the page. "Today, stepmom made me write a letter saying I hate Dad. I didn't want to. I don't hate Dad, but if I refused, she said she'd make me kneel until morning. I don't want Dad to think I'm a bad son, but I'm so scared." Tears splashed onto the page, blurring the words. David bit his lip and read on. "I want to tell Dad everything, but stepmom said if I do, she'll give him all the letters. She said he'll believe her, not me. Then Dad will leave me. I don't want to lose Dad. He's all I have left." David pressed the notebook to his chest, gasping for breath. He had always believed that he and Liam were everything to each other, bound by an unbreakable bond. But these shaky words revealed a terrifying truth. His boy had been living in constant fear of losing his father's love. While David, the one person, Liam, still had failed to protect him. He turned another page and felt his heart crack again. "Today, I dropped a spoon. Stepmom slapped me. It hurt, but I didn't cry. If I cried, she said she'd punish me worse. I miss Dad. If he saw, maybe he would hug me. But I didn't dare tell him. I saw Chloe being praised by stepmom for her good grades. But me, she called stupid, said I'd never make Dad proud. But I want Dad to be proud of me so much. I'm sorry, Dad." David could bear no more. He closed the notebook, clutching it to his chest as tears streamed down his face. Pain and rage swirled together until it felt like his chest would burst. He walked into Liam's room. The boy was asleep, his face thin and drawn, brows furrowed as if even in dreams he was still afraid. David sat on the edge of the bed and gently took his small hand. Liam stirred, blinking groggily. "Dad?" David's voice broke. "I'm sorry, Liam. I didn't see what you've been going through." Liam's eyes brimmed. Then suddenly he broke into sobs. He sat up and threw his arms around his father, his cries raw after months of silence. "I'm so scared, Dad. I don't want to write those letters." "I don't hate you. I only have you." David stroked his back, tears running freely. "I know, son. I know. I've seen it all. I read your diary. I believe you. I will never leave you." In the dark, father and son clung to each other, the only sounds the wind outside and Liam's muffled sobs. That night, for the first time in months, the boy poured it all out, every punishment, every slap, every forced letter. Even the nightmares where he was thrown out of the house, where his father turned away from him. Every word was another stab into David's heart. But the pain didn't break him, it hardened into resolve. He knew he could no longer delay. He held his son tightly and whispered, "You don't have to suffer alone anymore. Starting tomorrow, I'll do everything to protect you. No matter what, I'll bring you out of this darkness." Liam fell asleep against his father's shoulder, tears still wet on his cheeks. David laid him gently back in bed and stood watching the boy's worn little face. Once more, he whispered, "I promise. I won't let anyone hurt you again." Outside, snowflakes drifted from the sky, blanketing the world in white as if to cover their wounds. But in David's heart, a fire had ignited, the fire of protection, of determination. That morning, the sky was gray, raindrops blurring the window glass. David sat in his study, laptop open with saved recordings, Liam's diary lying beside it. He had not slept all night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his son kneeling in the corner, trembling as he wrote words that were not his own. He knew it was time. He could not delay another day. Melissa came down the stairs, carrying a sleepy Aiden in her arms. Chloe followed, chattering about school. David sat at the dining table, his gaze cold. Melissa paused briefly, then quickly put on her familiar, gentle smile. "You look so tired. What's wrong?" David did not answer. He waited until the children had gone upstairs, leaving only the two of them in the living room. Then he turned the laptop toward her and pressed play. On the screen, Amsa appeared, slapping Liam, forcing him to kneel in the corner. Her voice thundered through the speakers. "Useless. You're nothing but a burden." Melissa's face paled, but only for a moment. She quickly regained composure, folding her arms with a haughty tone. "That's just discipline. Children need strictness to grow up right." David's fist clenched. He switched to another clip. Melissa forcing Liam to write false letters, her hissed threat echoing through the room. "If you don't write, I'll show your father everything, so he'll abandon you." The sound filled the air, pressing the room into suffocating silence. David's voice dropped low, but fury burned in every word. "This isn't discipline, Melissa. This is abuse. This is cruelty." Melissa wavered, then scoffed. "You're naive. He's your child, not mine. I owe him nothing. I've given him a house, food, that's enough." David shot to his feet, his chest ablaze. He slammed his palm on the table. "No, Liam is my son. And from this moment on, I won't let anyone, not even you, hurt him again." The noise startled Liam, who crept halfway down the stairs. He clutched his old teddy bear, wide eyes fixed on his father and stepmother. Chloe peeked out too, her face paling as she saw the video on the laptop screen, her mother shouting at her stepbrother. "Dad!" Liam's voice trembled. David turned, his expression instantly softening. He knelt to his son's level, taking his frail hands. "Son, I know everything now. I believe you. I've seen it all. Read your diary. I'm so sorry for letting you endure alone for so long." Tears streamed down Liam's cheeks. He clung to his father's hands, as if gripping the only lifeline he had left. For the first time in months, he heard the words he had longed for. "I believe you." Melissa stepped forward, snapping, "You're destroying this family. He's just a spoiled child, making up lies to drive us apart." David turned sharply, his eyes icy. "I have the evidence, videos, letters, his diary. You cannot deny it." The air thickened with tension. Chloe stood frozen, tears glimmering in her eyes as she saw her mother's true face for the first time. She stammered, "Mom, did you really do this?" Melissa faltered, then shrieked. It was all for his own good. Without strictness, he'd be worthless. David stepped closer, his voice like iron. "No, you did it to humiliate him, to tear apart the bond between father and son. You made a 10-year-old boy live in fear, believing he was unworthy of love. That isn't strictness, it's cruelty." Melissa's face drained of color. The sound of Liam's sobs filled the house, mingling with David's heavy breaths. He gathered his son into his arms, holding him as if to make up for all the lost months. "You won't suffer another second, Liam, I promise." The boy buried his face into his father's shoulder, trembling. Chloe stepped closer, placing a hand on her stepbrother's shoulder, whispering with a broken voice, "I'm sorry, Liam. I didn't know." In that moment, every secret, every fear lay bare, and David knew the path ahead would not be easy. But at least now, he had stood up, placing himself between his son and the darkness. The confrontation ended not with reconciliation, but with David's unshakable decision. He would bring the truth into the light, with every piece of evidence in his hands. The next day, the Oregon sky was unusually clear, as if nature itself was signaling a change. David woke early, shut himself in his study, and sat before his laptop. On the screen played the damning recordings, Melissa shouting, striking, forcing Liam to write false letters. Every frame, every yell, every trembling of his son's hands stabbed into David's heart. He gathered all the videos, saved them to a separate hard drive, and slipped it into a folder along with Liam's small, battered diary. Its wrinkled pages bore shaky words like, "I'm sorry. Dad and I don't want to hate you," sentences that had made David wipe his tears again and again just to keep reading as the sky brightened. He put on his coat and called Mrs. Wilson, the kind neighbor, to watch the children. Liam's anxious eyes followed him, afraid his father was leaving. David crouched, gripping his son's shoulders. "I'm going to protect you, Liam, from now on. You don't have to be afraid." Liam nodded, tears glistening but in them. A spark of hope. At the town police station, David submitted all the evidence. The officer on duty opened the file, eyes narrowing as he watched the clips. Within minutes, his expression hardened with anger. "Mr. Miller, what you've brought us, this is clear evidence of child abuse. We'll open a case immediately." David nodded, hands clenched. He hadn't come seeking revenge, but to end his son's nightmare. Days later, a summons was issued. Melissa was ordered to appear in family court. News spread quickly through the small town, leaving neighbors stunned. The woman who once smiled sweetly at church now stood accused of abusing a child. The first hearing took place on a rainy morning. The courtroom was small, but the weight in the air was immense. Liam sat beside his father, clutching his hand, eyes filled with unease. Chloe was there too, pale and shaken. Unable to meet her mother's gaze, the prosecutor presented the evidence. The videos of Melissa shouting, slapping, forcing Liam to kneel, dictating hateful letters. Each clip sent ripples of shock through the room. Some people shook their heads, unable to believe. Then came Liam's diary. The judge read aloud the scrawled words, "I don't hate Dad. I only wrote it because I was forced." His voice faltered, and the courtroom fell into heavy silence. At first, Melissa tried to deny it. She insisted it was discipline, claimed Liam had lied to divide the family. But the evidence was overwhelming. As the footage replayed, her face turned ashen, lips trembling. Unable to defend herself, David wrapped his arm around his son's shoulder, whispering, "We don't have to be silent anymore." By the end, the judge's voice rang clear. Melissa Carter was stripped of all parental rights. Custody of all 3 children, Liam, Aiden, and even Chloe, was granted to David Miller. The courtroom fell silent for a beat. Then the gavel struck, sealing the decision. Liam broke down, sobbing into his father's chest. Chloe, crying too, finally approached her stepbrother and whispered, "I'm sorry. Liam, I didn't know I want to stay with you and Uncle David." David embraced both children, his heart swelling with grief and resolve. He knew the road ahead would be hard, a single father raising 3 children, 2 of them not his by blood. But he had never been more certain. This was the right choice, the only way to protect them. In the days that followed, the wooden house at the edge of town transformed once more. This time, there were no false smiles, no hidden shadows. Liam began to sleep peacefully again, no longer waking in terror. He picked up his diary once more, but now the first page read, "Dad believed me. Dad didn't leave me." Chloe slowly drew closer to her stepbrother, sharing homework, reading alongside him. Little Aiden laughed and played, his joy filling the house with light. Each time David watched the 3 of them playing in the yard, a deep calm settled over him. Justice, he realized, wasn't only handed down in court. It was in a father's choice to stand for his children against hardship, against doubt, against the weight of the world, and in his heart, David believed Grace's late wife was watching and smiling. He had kept his promise to her, to protect Liam, and now to protect all 3 children with every ounce of love he had. Spring arrived earlier than usual the following year. Along the road into town, maple trees sprouted tender green leaves, while sparrows chirped as they built nests beneath the eaves of the Miller family's wooden house. After months of shadows, the air inside that home now rang once again with children's laughter. David stood by the window, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, watching the backyard. Liam and Chloe were hanging freshly washed blankets, while little Aiden toddled after them, clutching a clothespin, babbling his first words. The simple scene blurred David's eyes with gratitude. We're still here. Together, life was not easy. Raising 3 children alone, one his late wife's son, one shared with Melissa, and one Melissa's daughter, meant triple the responsibility. But David did not see it as a burden. To him, it was a chance to rewrite their family story, to transform the house that once held fear into the safest haven of all. Liam changed day by day. He was no longer withdrawn as before, though nightmares still startled him at times. Now, whenever he woke in fear, he ran to his father's room. Nan David's arms were always open. Many evenings, father and son sat on the sofa, reading Liam's new diary entries aloud. They no longer brimmed with fear, but with hope. "Today we had dinner together without anyone scolding me. I felt happy. Chloe apologized, and now we do homework together. I think my real mom in heaven is smiling." Each line was proof that wounds were healing. Chloe, too, transformed. At first, she wept often, shaken after her mother lost custody. But over time, she found comfort in David's steady care and in her growing bond with Liam. One evening, she whispered shyly, "I don't know what to call you, but I know you really care about me." David smiled, brushing her hair. "You don't have to call me anything special. Just know you have a home here. That's enough." From then on, Chloe drew closer. She no longer avoided Liam's gaze, but shared chores with him, helped care for Aiden, and set the dinner table. Though she still carried grief toward her mother, Chloe began to understand. Family is not only blood, but choice and love. One weekend, David finally kept a promise he had made years earlier. He took the children camping at a lake by the forest, a trip Liam had long dreamed of. The sky was clear, the water mirror still, reflecting the green treetops. They pitched a tent, roasted marshmallows, and told stories under a canopy of stars by the fire's glow. Liam leaned against his father, teddy bear tucked under his arm, whispering, "I never thought we'd get to do this." Dad, David wrapped an arm around him, voice gentle. "I promised you. You'll never face anything alone again." Chloe, watching, pulled Aiden into her lap and smiled softly. "He'll grow up never knowing what we went through. We'll protect him, right, Liam?" Liam nodded, eyes shining with trust. That night, when the children slept soundly in the tent, David sat outside beneath the stars. Peace filled him, mingled with the weight of responsibility. He knew the road ahead would be long, but now they had a foundation, a family imperfect, yet real and bound together. A month later, Liam came home with a drawing. He handed it to his father shyly. "I drew our family." In the picture, 4 figures stood together, David in the center, holding Liam and Chloe's hands, with Aiden perched happily on his shoulders. At the bottom were 3 words, "My family, safe forever." David pulled his son into an embrace, tears brimming. It was more than a drawing, it was proof of their journey. From the darkness of fear, Liam had stepped into the light of trust. And David, at last, had kept his promise. One afternoon, as the children played outside, Mrs. Wilson, the neighbor who had long worried for Liam, came by. Watching the laughter in the yard, she turned to David. "I've never seen this house so full of joy. David, you did the right thing." David smiled, eyes on the children. "I only did what any father should." Mrs. Wilson nodded, her eyes misting. The new life did not erase old scars, but it brought healing. Liam still had nightmares. Chloe still wrestled with guilt about her mother. And one day, Aiden would ask why she wasn't there. But David believed that with love, they could face it all. One quiet evening, after the children had gone to bed, David sat alone in the living room. His gaze fell on Grace's photo on the shelf. He whispered softly, "You can rest now. I kept my word. Liam is safe. And Chloe and Aiden too. I'll raise them with all the love I have." A breeze stirred, making the wind chime sing a gentle reply. David closed his eyes, peace washing over him. This new family was not born of perfection, but of courage, of choosing love in the face of brokenness. And in the little wooden house on the edge of Oregon, children's laughter rang once more, proof that love can heal all wounds. Perhaps what lingers after this story is not only the pain of a little boy or the strength of a father, but also a message for anyone about to step into a family where children already exist. If you truly love that man, remember, your love comes with responsibility. The child is not at fault. He or she is just an innocent part of a story they never chose. If you are not ready to love your husband's child as your own, then, at the very least, treat them with basic kindness, says one human being to another. What children need most is not grand promises, but the feeling of safety, of being seen, of being respected. A gentle look, a hug, or simply not turning them into victims of comparison and coldness. Sometimes that is enough to change the course of an entire childhood. Thank you for listening with Snail Story. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue sharing meaningful journeys of healing together.